Call the meeting to order.
Hooray.
Happy New Year to everyone. Glad we could all be here to share this moment. We need a roll call. Is that Amber that handles it?
Yes, sir. Chair Zabilla. Here. Vice Chair Jagiello. Commissioner Nolan.
Here.
Commissioner Merck. Commissioner Quillisi.
Here.
Commissioner Corbin.
Here.
Commissioner Powers.
Here.
Mayor Johnston.
Here.
Mayor Pro Tem Wyrick.
Here.
Councilmember Haney.
Here.
Councilmember Blatz.
Here.
Sorry. Councilmember Francina.
Present.
Present.
Okay, I guess it's Pledge of Allegiance. Paul, would you lead us in the pledge?
Sure. After me, I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Okay. Do we have any presentations? None? Oh, well, yeah. Okay, if not, public comment. We have a hand back there. Is that Judy? Okay. Oh.
This won't take 3 minutes. I'm Judy DeVore. I've been the ombudsperson for the second unit compliance program for the last couple of years. And I know tonight you're considering the state's new thoughts on developing additional dwelling units. Is that what they're calling the thing? Yeah. Two things. One, in the time that I've been helping people navigate this system, I've made some observations. And so, because the document that I was using had a few ambiguities and inconsistencies in it that required clarification and created a lot of confusion and a lot of discouragement among people who were kind of interested, I'm happy to offer my input on that when you get around to doing the guidelines as to where I ran into some problems. That's assuming you still want an ombudsperson and that you still want me to do it. Okay. And the second thing is, since everybody knows housing is just this big problem, and I'm very interested in seeing Ojai get housing that's affordable, as distinguished maybe from affordable housing, I don't know. Housing that's affordable. I'm interested in seeing this program really get developed. And I watched the second unit program kind of lay there, to be honest with you. And I tried a couple of times to get more interest in it. And it was always seemed to be a work in progress. So maybe with this state push and these new guidelines, you're drafting a new ordinance, if you get a program that feels solid and you want to advance it, you might consider, just a thought, creating a bit of a staff position for someone to develop this program, get it out there, talk to people, make sure they understand it, encourage people, because there are quite a number of parcels that are big enough to put a second dwelling on, and it will go, this is a huge problem, and there's a lot of moving parts to it, but this could be a way to really get some relief of the problem. So those are my two thoughts. I'll help if you're interested in the problems with the last guidelines, and also if you want somebody to develop the program, I'd be happy to do that.
Okay. Thank you. Is there anyone else in the audience that would like to make a public comment? Okay, if not, let's, what? No.
Hi, Diane Squire, 703G North Ventura Street in Ojai. I will mention this in the larger meeting coming up, but I just got notice of a 15% a month increase in my rent for 2017. And I know several people in the complex are seniors. Some will have to possibly move out. It's a problem. So anything you can do to help with rentals in this valley is a big push, and it's a big help. Thank you.
Okay, fine. Thank you. Okay, if I'm not mistaken, after the meeting's called to order, Paul, you used to turn it over to the chairman of the Planning Commission. Rosalie, would you like to?
Sure. So, as you have all read in your staff report, they provided a lot of context on this issue, and this has been an ongoing issue for the Planning Commission. We've been working on this since 2015, and we had 4 meetings prior to coming to some kind of clarity and consensus at that time. But it was a tortured process because we really were having a hard time thinking about growth relative to the resources that we have, including water. And by the time we came to conclusion in April of 2016, we had come up with a plan it was a fairly conservative plan to increase second units and tie the size of the second unit to larger parcels. So when that got presented to City Council in June, there were 3 members there, and their feeling at the time was that we should open it up a lot more. Then everyone sort of became really cognizant of how dire our water situation is, so that by the time we got to our joint meeting, I think it was in September, our direction was to be more conservative. Then we've had now since these new guidelines come out. And the guidelines definitely open up the possibility of a lot more units. For instance, the guidelines say that any single-family home in a single-family zone can be turned into 2 units by right. So that right there is a lot of houses that could be turned into 2 units by right. So the question is, where do we go from here, knowing that we have not resolved our water problems, that we want to preserve our small-town character, and at the same time, people are asking for housing. I think we have come to some consensus that smaller housing makes for attainable housing, if not affordable housing. Affordable housing being more of a official term when something is indentured and the rents are restricted. But smaller leads to attainable in terms of pricing. The bigger they get, the more expensive they get. So we are just looking, before we embark once again with these new ADU guidelines in place, for some guidance from you as to how we balance growth and preserving our small-town character. With one other caveat, that if we are within half a mile of a public transportation, which is most of the city, based on our trolley stop, no parking has to be provided for those second units. So any cars associated with those new second units will go on the street, more than likely. So to think about what our streets then look like when you drive down Fulton and Drown now, and they're just stacked up, and kids run out, and dogs, and, you know, it really has the potential to change the city radically. And how do we do this, and how do we do it in a measurable way so we know what we're doing? We don't just say, well, let's just do it this way and cross our fingers.
Okay. How would you like to proceed? Bill?
I have a comment, but I don't want to be out of turn.
Well,
However you want to proceed.
you have the floor.
I wanted to just make a short comment for context, because I think there's something missing in my watching the Planning Commission deliberations. And that is that there was discussion about the general plan with respect to small-town character, but there was no discussion of general plan with respect to our housing element, which is every bit as important as, and I actually thought I'd make a copy of the page and pass it around, just to point out that I think that part of what we have to deal with is the general plan, and we can't forget about that in our discussion. And the general plan states that second units are deemed affordable to moderate income households by design, without covenants required. Recall that when a long time ago, and I think we lose this context, it states in here that during the new planning period, the city will consider additional amendments to second unit regulations to encourage construction of second units. So our general plan said that, we need to do this, and that was the original instigation to turn it over to the Planning Commission, how to do this in a way that addresses all the concerns that you went through. But I just wanted to address it. I don't think that we can cherry pick the general plan and to just talk about the small town character without looking at how second units are described in the housing element is a little bit like that, okay? And all of that has to be accepted. It's in our general plan. I've heard discussion about, or I'm concerned about increased density. The general plan states that second units will be encouraged, which means additional density. And it's a matter of how we want to manage that density, not the if, unless we want to change the general plan. And then the other comment I want to make is that I think the Planning Commission should be careful when you're interpreting the general plan. By statute and by case law, general plan interpretations are squarely in the seat of the council. Actually not staff and not any commissions. The courts are really there. If there's a question about interpretation of the general plan, that's supposed to happen at the council level. So I just wanted to make those comments just for context.
Is that accurate, City Attorney? I thought it was ultimately the courts that decided whether we were interpreting the general plan correctly.
Well,
If
sure.
challenged, it would be up to a court to decide the matter. Short of a court challenge, the council is the final arbiter on general plan issues with the input as required of the Planning Commission and the public.
Absolutely, of
Right.
course, yeah. I'm just saying, in terms of deciding on an interpretation, the input comes from everybody, and then the council has to discuss it.
They make the ultimate decision.
Yeah.
That's correct.
So I just wanted to provide that context, because I've heard some discussion about whether we want more density. I don't see how we can block density without having a problem with our general plan compliance.
Well, other comments? Steve?
Thank you, sir. And thus, we are here asking for guidance from the city council on ADUs as well as other things. I note with interest as well that in the same paragraph that the councilman mentioned, it says, furthermore, second units are exempt from growth management and traffic impact policies. That may be good and it may not be good, but it's in the general plan right now.
Can you find a microphone?
Oh, sorry. I said that.
It's now on.
That
Reread it.
excuse me. In the same paragraph of general plan that Councilman Wyrick mentioned, it says, furthermore, second units are exempt from growth management and traffic impact policies. I take that would include parking as well. And that may be something we like and it may be something we don't like, but that's the rules we have to go by right now.
Susan?
What I would like to say is that with this move, to me, the density in itself is not a problem. What is a problem is if it just makes it more clear to my way of thinking that what we need is green, sustainable density with wise water practices. And we want to promote the idea of people car sharing, people using their cars less. I think we need like a whole, as people become aware that they can do this, we need a whole education program, I don't know how else to describe it, so that we can explain how this can work without destroying our small town character.
And bikes.
Yes, that's what I was saying, yeah.
Absolutely.
It makes it even more important that we have complete streets.
Kathleen?
This is something I was going to read more towards the end, but maybe I'll say it now because I feel like it's relevant. Hold on one second. Find it.
I think I get closer to the mic.
Yeah, let me do that. So this is about creating a livable and resilient community. And this kind of dovetails on what Councilmember Francina and Councilmember Wyrick were saying. And this is about a living street And a living street is really a combination of complete streets. It's also low-impact development. And it's also just what the overall ambiance or sense of place that you're creating. So I'm just going to read this. A living street naturally manages stormwater, reduces the risks of floods, captures pollution, improves water quality, provides safe access for all modes of travel, and encourages community activity in our public spaces and input from local people in its realization. Living streets are greener, cooler, healthier, and more connected for all its residents. By taking a living streets approach, you could take a significant and much-needed step toward meeting our cities and states' sustainability goals, while simultaneously making our most vulnerable community members more prepared in the face of anticipated climate impacts. Not every street can, nor should every street include every physical aspect of a living street. However, every street project should go through a living street checklist that considers multiple strategies to improve neighborhoods for people today and assures a climate resilient tomorrow. And I think what Susan was pointing out is that you can't just isolate the housing, the water, the streets. It's all one big package. And I think it's us looking at all of that and trying to strike a balance. And education, I do agree, is very important.
Other comments?
John,
Yeah,
Mayor.
Randy.
If you turn to page 8 on our attachment, it says, can a local government adopt less restrictive requirements? If you read that paragraph, to me, it simply states that you already have existing ordinances, you already have existing lot coverages. What they're saying is, take this new law and make it fit into your environment. It's not saying recreate your ordinances, it's not saying throw away your ordinances, it's saying take what you have and figure out how to manage this process. I think that's what should come back to planning as your priority. Take what we have and figure out how to make it fit. So if we're saying that we're going to allow a 1,200 square foot second unit, and that's our maximum allowable, then figure out which R1, R2, R3 that 1,200 square foot can fit into. And then take a look at what can 750 fit into, and what can 500 feet fit into. Because my lot, which is 80 by 80, is not gonna take a 1,200 square foot room addition. But it did at one time accept a 600 square foot addition. So that's what I'm trying to say, is I don't think they're telling us to rewrite the rules. What they're saying is take a look at what's existing and make this work, and make it work for the betterment of your community. That's my take on it.
Any other comments?
I guess I'm next. I agree with what you said, and I think that when I envision it, I envision things like this, where it's small and tight. And I think that is very much in keeping with the small town character. I think, individual houses spaced out as suburban, and I don't really think that's small town character either. So the density part doesn't bother me. I've lived in many wonderful places. Cambridge, Massachusetts was very dense. My neighbors were 7 feet away from me, but it couldn't have had more character than any place else. And I don't think that they're mutually exclusive. I think that certain types of housing units and sizes will be more appropriate on certain lots, and the bigger ones will be appropriate in other areas. And I think it's going to fall out that way. And I say, great. And I certainly want to encourage more of the smaller units because they will be more affordable.
Well, just to clarify real quick, we did submit, this is really the spirit of the plan that we submitted originally, was something that was tied to the lot size. It got bigger with the lot size, with the emphasis on the smaller units, trying to cultivate those. So I don't think anybody's saying anything that we haven't actually already been on the trail of. It's just, as you say, how do we now take this, where there are some things that are just unavoidable, and make it work?
Steve.
Thank you, Mayor. My feeling is that the municipal code and the state law that we have in place right now should suffice. We don't even need to a priori figure out what sort of second unit is okay for any particular lot. We have setback requirements, we have lot coverage requirements, we have the requirement in the code and the state law that says 50% of the size of the primary unit to a maximum of 1,200. And it sounds to me like, unless you want to allow something larger than 1,200 on a very large piece of property, that we have a very workable set of standards right now. And if someone comes in to build a second, with a proposal to build a second unit, if it comes before the Planning Commission, we can simply say, how big is the lot? How big is the primary unit? Here's how big a second unit you should be able to do within the code, and we're done. I don't think it's that hard a problem anymore. Thank you.
Oh, sorry, go ahead.
I have staff would like to say something, if that's okay. So I just want to clarify something, because I think there's this impression that there's setbacks and lot coverage for every zone district. There's not in the city of Ojai. So there is no lot coverage for some of the larger lots, like the RO 1, 2, 3, and 4. There's just not. So there's some fundamental missing things. I mean, I think when we were all talking about this before, and I think this is why there's this miscommunication out there, is we were really talking about, smaller lots, because that's where everybody saw the problem, was on the smaller lots. So the focus was on that, and there is lot coverage for R1 property, but you can't then just assume that it goes to everything else. So one of the things that I think that's kind of important is that obviously if you have a 4-acre lot, the idea is that lot coverage wouldn't be appropriate because it's so big. How could you possibly cover that much of the lot? But I think staff needs to have direction from City Council whether to bring back some lot coverages or some other constraints that would then help. The other thing that is one of the things, and we just recently had an example here of the Blanche Street project the Planning Commission did, where a lot that's non-conforming has this get-out-of-jail kind of criteria or rule in the non-conforming section, which says, hey, if you're a non-conforming property, you don't have to adhere to the regular setbacks in the zone district. You can adhere to the setbacks of the existing property based on a zone clearance from the director. So I think we just need to understand that sometimes when we're looking at one thing, there's another section in the back section of the code that will allow somebody to do something different. And those are the kind of things that we seem to have a hard time because the code is written with so many of those exceptions in it. And so I would just like some direction on what you would like for me to do with that with my planning commissioners so that we're not getting down the road and then realize that we have some unintended consequences by just assuming everything was in place.
Mayor, I just heard a good starting, I'm sorry, did someone else want to speak?
I mean, I was going to, we had another hand, but that's.
That's fine, go ahead.
Ray.
Thanks, Ray. I have a few comments and a question. First, in reality, there haven't been that many second units or ADUs built. It's on, but it may not be on. My light's on. Okay, I'll borrow another one.
Yeah, thanks for asking.
There we go. So, it's been brought to my attention in the Planning Commission meetings that first of all, there aren't that many second units or ADUs that are built on a yearly basis. They're expensive to build. I mean, even a 200 square foot place can run, $80,000, $100,000, $120,000. So, I just like to keep in mind that with the density issue, because it's a concern of mine, the traffic's a concern of mine, the safety of children on the blocks is a concern of mine. Second stories built on that overlook, a neighbor's bedroom window or something concerns me. But in reality, I don't, even though we want affordable housing, and that's why the state regulations were brought forward, I honestly don't think that many get built from what I can see. Now, what I would like to see is the focus be on smaller units, that, we lower it down to 200 square feet, and only in rare cases even allow a 1,200 square foot, because a 1,200 square foot home in Ojai is not an affordable house, any way you slice it. You may have the lot size, but it certainly wouldn't be an affordable house. I'd rather see someone build 300 square foot ADUs where a 1,200 square foot would go. In terms of character of the town, there's a lot of different kinds of character here. If we go from Drown Street to the Arbolada to north of Grand, there's lots of different kinds of character. Persimmon Hill. So what is the character of Ojai? We're colorful. And there's lots of different demographics. My question is, even though it states that by right a homeowner can build an ADU, are we able to limit how many actually get built in a particular neighborhood or block? Can the city say, 4 units are allowed here? No, we can't do that. Well,
No, the city does not have the power to impose numeric limits by block, by area, by neighborhood, or otherwise. You can impose effective limits taking into account constraints that are inherent in the zoning code or that are modified, but you cannot impose straight numeric limits. That will get struck down.
Okay. And is it currently okay to build a 200 square foot unit?
That's too fact-specific a question to answer directly. You could, if you met the requirements for the particular project, you could put a 200 square foot unit in, yes. But it would depend on the exact facts.
Okay.
Is that true of all lots, or does the zoning have some control over the density of a lot? I mean, if I had an acre property, can I put 5 houses on it?
No.
If they're small enough? No, right, so there is some regulation. You just can't arbitrarily decide this area can do it and that one can't, right?
Correct. As I understood the question from Commissioner Powers, it was, can the city limit by the number of second units? To which the answer is no, but the city can limit the number of third and greater units. In other words, density limits the number of units on a parcel to whatever the number is, given the parcel size and the density constraint. State law says you get one more, 1 second unit.
Right.
But you don't get more than that unless you meet the density. So a 4-acre parcel, 1 acre per lot, could have 4 lots. Plus 1 each, it could have 8 lots, 8 units on those 4 acres, if it met the rest of the requirements of the code.
Randy, did you?
I wanted to address also, there's some other conflicting issues with this that we need to think about. And that's our utility hookups. I think that's going to have to be addressed in the planning and how we address that aspect of will serve letters, whether we're going to require them or we're not going to require them. I think that's important that planning address that. And I think also the only waiver of any setbacks that I've read, I think, is on garages. So again, I think we have everything that we need. It's there. Let's just let's not get caught up in the weeds, and let's just address specific needs and concerns and deal with them. And I think this commission can do it. And Kathleen, what I was going to say when you started talking about R1s and R2s and RO3s, again, your responsibility is to lead the charge. You need to identify the areas that you feel that need to be modified or looked at more closely and bring that to the attention of Rosalie, and I think through your direction and leadership that we can achieve this.
I can do that.
Yes.
Just a quick comment, and this has to do with the unit size. I'm in favor of going down to the minimum of 150, which is in the new state code, and also to the maximum of 1,200 square feet. And I understand, the smaller it is, the more affordable, but I also look at families. I think we're kind of thinking about single people or couples all the time. And what if someone has 3 or 4 kids? You know, the 1,200, and based on the size of the property, it may work. We can't control the materials or the quality of these structures. The homeowner's going to do that, and somebody may just deck it out, and maybe they won't. But I would like to see us have the full range.
Is the assumption on affordability based on size or covenant or restriction, or is it just based on market, that if we have a big enough supply, that'll force rents down?
So the general plan talks about the second units are deemed affordable to moderate income, and moderate income is pretty much market rate. When people are talking about affordable with quotes around it, there's a matrix that's provided in Ventura County, which Ojai would be part of, which talks about the number of people in the home and then the amount of income you can have in relation to how big your family goes. And so extremely low and are all part of what you would consider indentured. So in our arena right now, because I just got done finishing the housing report.
The update report.
The update report.
Yeah.
We, generally speaking, the state of California and the HC Housing Community Development Department, the state of California, considers housing units to be moderate or above moderate if they're not indentured. So if they're indentured to, as the woman spoke up a minute ago, was saying she was receiving her rent increase. If it was an indentured piece of property, was deed restricted to be affordable, then they would have to prove that the rents and the people in there meet that criteria. But if not, we're just talking about a general concept of being affordable and moderate, which would be, as Commissioner Nolan said, would depend on how large it is and how you appoint it. 1,200 square feet can be affordable. Lots of communities, 1,200 square feet is affordable. You can build it that way. You see, it would be more track-type fixtures in it and those types of things. But it could also be very lush and upscale. So it's without us having any kind of say, because it's not restricted, it's really up to the person who builds it.
But yes, we're talking about increasing supply to meet affordability, or the need for affordability. We are not yet talking about deed restricting, rent controlling. We're talking about simply increasing supply in the hope that makes more.
But the idea of conditioning the additional unit has gone out the window, as affordable, has gone out the window with the state law.
But also the point is that this means that we don't have to covenant in order to get RENA credit.
That's right. You don't have to covenant to get RENA credit. You just wouldn't get credit for extremely low or low, any of those categories.
So we get general RENA credit.
Correct. That is right. Mm-hmm.
Could I make one other comment real quick?
Sure.
As our mayor? I think one of the things that drives the structure of second units being inherently more affordable is if anybody looks at an appraisal of a residential property in California, we are so outlier from the rest of the country. What's the biggest component of value in a residential property in the city of Ojai? It's not the building, it's the land. And so inherently, I mean, we have extremely high percentages of land component in total value. It's probably one of the highest in the country. In California generally, are nice cities in California. And so inherently, if you're amortizing that major component of valuation across more square footage, you inherently have an affordability structure that you're tapping into by not having to buy land to put up housing. Just wanted to make that point. And the other issue I wanted to state is that we've danced around the issue of small, which I'm in favor of, which means we also ought to look at the tiny housing, the tiny home matter.
Mr. Mayor, if I could. I tend to agree with Steve Quillisi and Councilman Haney, and to a certain degree with Commissioner Nolan. We have certain, all this law is really doing is saying that as a matter of right, somebody can put a second dwelling unit on their property. That's it. It doesn't say that we have to allow a certain size, and I think we have the zoning in place now that limits the size. If it's a small lot, you may only be able to fit 150 square foot. If you have a big lot, you're going to be able to maybe fit 1,200 square feet if that's what you want to do. I don't think we have to mess with that. So where I see us protecting our community is in the design and in the building materials. And I think that we can do design work when it comes to the second dwelling unit, because we already have in the codes, it says that the second dwelling unit has to be consistent in design with the main building. Isn't that correct?
That's correct.
Okay. So we do, and it's going to go before the Planning Commission for a design review, I would presume.
No.
Can it go before the Planning Commission for a
No.
design review? So who's going to determine if the design is consistent with the main building?
Nobody.
So it would go through a zoning clearance. Oh, thank you. So it would go through a zoning clearance when it goes to comes straight into the building division of the community development department. And the first thing that's going to happen is they're going to fill out a zoning clearance form, and a planner's going to look at it. And one of the things that the way back when, a year or so ago, that the Planning Commission and I think the City Council had approved of was changing some of that wording and making it a little bit more, like as you're saying, consistent with, instead of mirroring. It kind of was before mirroring, so we were kind of softening it a little bit. But no, as it stands right now, it's going to be by right and just a zoning clearance, and unless it's two-story, correct, Matt?
Right.
With an exception, yes, I'll explain briefly. If a second unit meets the requirements of the second unit ordinance, which mirror the requirements of state law, then the city cannot impose discretionary review, including design review. But the planning staff can confirm through a zoning clearance that it is consistent with the design of the primary residence. The exception is if a property comes in for a second unit that will involve new second-story construction, that is new construction on the second story. Then it goes to the Planning Commission for a full design review permit. The point to note there is that if the second unit is entirely within the existing second story, no new second-story construction, and has independent exterior access, and has setbacks that are adequate for fire safety, and that second story is an existing legal second story, then too it is exempt under another subsection of the state law.
But
Thank you.
isn't it true that in essence it's getting a design review through staff that says it's going to be consistent with the main building?
Right, it's gonna, I mean,
And if you decide it doesn't, then it's got to come before the Planning Commission. Can
No.
it be appealed?
It won't, that's.
If staff decided that the project as proposed wasn't consistent with the main house, then the staff could reject it for that reason with the right evidence, at which point that decision could be appealed to the Planning Commission.
Right, as a zoning clearance, okay.
So that's where we need to pay attention, I think, is in the design of those second units. And the smaller, the better. But if the lot would fit it, and if we're doing some new building standards anyway, so the second units would fit into those same building standards, I would presume, right? Which is water-wise and green building and all that, then I think that's where we protect our city, is in the design area when it goes through the counter.
So, on that note, where are we on the water-wise? That's what concerns me the most, that, I mean, obviously the state is going to preempt and tell us what we're going to do up to a point, but the fact that the general plan has, I think, Bill, you used the term cherry pick, and it's possible to cherry pick, but there's also the problem of the inherent conflicts that are just there, and we have to decide what our values are and what's most important. And some of the comments I've heard from planning commissioners is that they have a concern of not going so fast, that if you think of it theoretically, if every lot in town can put one more unit on it, think what that does in a 4 square mile place. I don't care how cute they are, you're no longer a small town. So, but in addition to that, what do we do about the water right now? So if we're working on the water-wise thing, the green thing is nice. And I would agree as a former home builder that when I heard 1,200 square feet, now admittedly this was in the 80s over in Arizona, but one of our larger units was 1,200 square feet. It was a home in a subdivision, and they started at 900 square feet. So if these are additional units, 1,200 square feet, obviously for a family that you do need a little larger, but since we can't control the size of these things except through our existing zoning laws, setback and what have you, we don't really know what we're going to get. We also put in a trolley system because of our transportation element that we think is important, and based on how we do that, that changed over the years, and now we've put a loop in that puts almost every property probably within, or not every property, but a number of properties within the half mile of, quote, the trolley that doesn't really get you very far except to the bus station. Then that raises the question, should we be looking at that too? Now, people are not rushing to build these right now, and they are expensive, but the real problem comes in when they start adapting the homes and the garages in some areas. If you're living in that neighborhood, you might have greater concern if your neighbor decides to do that, and then we're faced with the short-term rental issue where people are looking to create extra units or doors on the side of garages I've noticed around town that I presume were put in for the purpose of making them accessible for someone else to rent and not necessarily permanently. So I can see the concern that the Planning Commission has as to what should they be doing. I guess my opinion is that we have to do what the state says minimally. I don't think we should rush to do more than what the state says we have to do, and I think we should use what tools are available to us to take a measured step. I know the city of Ventura last night, I don't know what the outcome was, but they were introducing legislation to give themselves a little protection while they figure this out too. So we're not by ourselves. This is a very tough problem. But I guess what discourages me the most is that when affordability, most of the people who talk to us are talking about really not necessarily indentured property, but property that is within the income of people. And if we just build a bunch of more houses and people love to live up here, and they do, a lot of people would love to, then you have both the traffic and the price of housing stays up. So I sympathize with the Planning Commission trying to figure out what to do, but I would say, measured steps and caution, and include the water-wise.
I want to take one small issue with something you just said, real quick. Go.
Oh, you've been waiting? Go ahead,
Go.
Susan.
Okay, is there a provision in the legislation that forbids these units to be used as short-term rentals?
Yes.
We can.
The legislation
allowed to.
allows the city to impose that prohibition, and the city has imposed that prohibition.
We already have
On
that.
everything.
I know that, but the state supports that.
Yes, the state allows us to impose that prohibition.
Okay, and then the flip side of that is that there's all these people saying, well, they couldn't rent their unit out to long-term renters because it doesn't have a kitchen. But now that excuse has gone out the window because they can legally put in a kitchen, and then it can be a long-term rental. Yeah, okay, thank you.
The one nuanced
Bill.
comment I'd like to make on something you said is, I'm not sure you meant it, but in terms of the implied correlation between more living units here in the city limits and more traffic. And that's not necessarily a one-to-one relationship, because there's a lot of people, we have an extraordinarily high number of people that commute into the city to work. Very high percentage. And if more of them could live here and not have to commute, we actually might, with the right kind of additional living units, reduce our traffic problems.
And I would agree with that if we had the ability to provide housing at a price those folks can.
Exactly.
Right, it'd be very nice if the people could live here and work here.
Yeah.
But unfortunately, the reason they commute now is our prices are up, and they're
Exactly.
going to stay up until,
Mayor, that's the whole idea behind smaller being better.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
And there's some other long-term uses out of this too, because we have friends that have done it. And they have existing second units on their property, and what they've done is they've moved to the smaller unit and are renting out the front unit because it can accommodate a larger family. And they don't need the larger space anymore as they have downsized. So there's a lot of things that will actually self-regulate as this comes to fruition. And I just think that, again, taking it slow, thinking it through, and creating, again, we're a tourist-based economy, and we're a service industry, and we have no place for these people to work, to live. And I think that that's something that we really need to look at when we use the term affordable. When we just throw the term affordable out there, well, I'd love to live in Malibu, but I can't afford to live there. Should they build me a home? I don't think they should. So we need to think about that when we use that term affordable. To me, the most important thing is that we look at what we're trying to achieve And we don't get caught up in this taking 5 years to figure it out. You know, we got a mandate, we've got quality people on this commission, we've got great people in this community if you need additional support and advice and expertise, and I think that we can do this sooner than later.
Didn't I hear somebody, the maximum and the minimum is 1,200 square feet?
No, the minimum is 150 square feet.
Oh, it is?
1,200 depending on the
Okay,
lot size.
okay, so that discussion about 12 and up, 12 is 12, because I'm going to think that's not getting very small, yes.
Historically, it's always been 640 square feet. Maximum regardless of the size of the lot. And this just allows it to go up, which I don't think is a bad idea. And I think the market will set the price. If you have a 200 square foot residence, you're not going to be able to get $2,500 for that. By its nature, it's going to have to be less than that.
Right, but one of the problems, not too long ago, you could rent a room in somebody's house for $300. You can't anymore. No place, I don't believe in the town, you can do that, and so even though it's small, it's a relative number, and up goes the price, okay. Oh, we do have one card that, is that Bill? Are you out there, Miley? Yeah.
Good evening. I have a question that maybe I was looking at the law, the state law, the Assembly Bill 2299, which I think drives all this. And item 8 talks about the issue of lot size, and I don't know whether this statement says it falls under the law or is excluded. Matthew 8, item 8 says, an accessory dwelling unit that conforms to the subdivision shall be deemed to be an accessory use or an accessory building and shall not be considered to exceed the allowable density for the lot. Does that say it can or it has to be excluded from lot size? Here, I copied it, exactly.
The language that's quoted, what it means is that it's the basic rule for density for second units. What it means is that when you're assessing the density of a property, the second unit does not count. It's 1 plus, the base density plus 1. That's what that language means.
So you can't control a second unit because it exceeds the lot size, right? I mean, the property,
Not lot size,
footprint.
density.
Footprint. Oh, okay.
This is specific to density,
Yeah.
not lot size. Density is the number of units per acre. That limitation, you get plus 1 with the second unit.
Yeah, Bill Miley, density is different from lot coverage. You might be
Okay.
confusing the two.
All right.
Yeah.
So my comment is, Cottage of the Flowers was, I think, built in the 20s on Aliso Street. There's like 10 or 12 of them there. The Evergreen cottages, which no longer exist as of about 10 years ago, they were built probably in the 20s too. So how does somebody take a large lot and build a bunch of small cottages that are 300 to 400 feet in size and rent them out for reasonable prices? How do we do that now? To me, that's what we ought to be doing. And that goes along with the lady that spoke earlier. And that's the tiny house issue. And modular homes, you can buy a modular home for 300 or 400 square feet for about $30,000, $40,000, $50,000 plus setting it down. And that's reasonable. Thank you.
Thank you, Bill. Other comments?
I just want to support what Bill said. I think that's what Ojai needs. You know, small houses clustered together. There's a place, a tiny house community, and things similar to cottages among the flowers and the demolished evergreen cottages. That's when we really had affordable housing, truly affordable housing.
And we talked about cluster housing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I have a
Kathleen?
thank you. So I have a question for the council. So this is another one of those things that comes out from working on a project that really has nothing to do with second units or accessory dwelling units, which is currently right now, so all you understand that when I first came here and I worked on a piece of property, it was very large. The rules in the city's zoning ordinance allow a person to have one house for one lot, regardless of how big your lot is, and an accessory dwelling unit. Many cities have these things called cluster housing or cluster housing rules and regulations where they allow somebody to build out to their maximum density without subdividing the land. But those rules really are developed to kind of keep the houses clustered together and keep open space open, okay? And so that's one of the things you can also look at changing in addition to the second unit dwelling or the accessory dwelling unit, because there are some people that want to put more than one house, but they want to make it a house, not necessarily, they want to build to their density without subdividing. They want to leave it all in one piece of property and have control of it. And so that's something else the council can give direction to staff for the planning commission to look at, and we can develop those regulations that would help facilitate some people that have bigger lots, providing whether they would be caretakers or, let's say, a family compound. I've had some inquiries recently where people want to have a house for their children, and they want to be able to go above the 1,200, and their density would allow it, but we just have regulations that restrict it.
I guess one of the basic questions that I've probably been asked several times, but if it's every lot, every residential lot plus one, or is it every lot in town plus one on the accessory units? Can you have residential anywhere on any zone?
No, it's every residential, single-family residential lot plus one.
Right, so, and we know how many lots we have in town?
Somebody does, I think,
Anyway, we don't need to know
yeah.
tonight, but I would say that would be a starting point on on this question of population, traffic, and what have you, is you take the number of lots that are eligible for this. That's the same number of additional units, well, maybe a few less, because they've already got accessory units. And then we know what the size of the problem, or the magnitude of the problem is, and then say, everybody's not going to build one, obviously. But I guess my feeling is a little bit like Randy's. If you can't control the price of the additional dwelling units, then having the option to build smaller ones that would make them affordable makes some sense. But 150 square feet,
Awful small.
I've lived in 500, and that's tight.
So there are, I just want to just throw this out for consideration, is that in some cities where they're looking to allow, as Planning Commissioner Power said, is that they look at, they have a variable density, and so, one unit for one density is a certain size, let's say 1,200 square feet, and then everything smaller than that is a fraction of a density unit. You have to adopt it that way. And there goes somebody, you're encouraged to do, SROs. I mean, like if you're building an apartment complex, you're going to build some smaller ones in amongst, because it's a way of getting more density without it actually violating the density rules, because, obviously the theory being smaller units don't have this, like he was saying, 200 square foot units, don't have as many impacts as 1,200 does. So there's lots of ways you can encourage the smaller, because if people can get more, smaller units in, they will gravitate towards that. So there are lots of tools in the toolbox that that I can bring up to the planning commissioners, but right now, our direction has been just to work on the second unit and not these other issues that have been brought up tonight.
Ray?
Well, to answer
Yeah.
There's 1,150 R1 units in the city of Ojai, by the way. I want to make sure that we dovetail and are simultaneously really looking at the water and land management ordinances, that all this kind of happens at once, or as close to at once as we can. Personally, I would like to know that any new ADU that goes in has to conform to land management and water management practices that are conservation-minded, which would mean, low flow toilets and, rainwater harvesting, If the landscape is torn up to put it in, the new landscape that goes in needs to conform to the water-wise, drought-resistant plans we have. And then all that comes together at the same time, so we don't start getting designs for new ADUs without these new land and water management practices in place.
Okay, thank you.
Could I ask a clarification on that point? I assume, Mr. Summers, that would allow, are we also allowed to condition the primary residence with second unit construction for any upgrades in terms of things like storm water retention on the parcel, gray water retrofits, things like that? Is that within the city's purview or not?
If the standard is adopted as a standard applicable to all new residential construction, then it could be applied to new construction second units. It could not be applied to second units that involved solely interior conversion, and it could not be applied to second units that fit in that exception. I recited part of which earlier, which is a second unit fully within the building envelope of an existing legal residence with existing exterior access and existing fire safety adequate setbacks.
Okay, thank you.
Okay.
Just two quick questions, or one comment about the WaterWise. We have already worked on WaterWise development standards. We have sent them to City Council just to have a quick blessing before we fine-tune it. So we're ready to look at that any time, and we really should, so that it can all go hand in hand.
So that staff report is with the city manager and getting prepared for the 24th, right? The 24th, correct?
Correct. We just haven't determined a date when we're going to put it on, but staff is ready to take it on the 24th, if desired.
Thank you.
Oh, I'm sorry. I spoke out of turn, but yes, it's prepared.
Okay, we're getting close to the end, but I'll leave you go right ahead. And last comment, then we.
I had asked Nicole if I could add a couple things during this discussion, and we're only taking about 2 minutes. Oh my gosh, sorry about that. So these were a couple things regarding sustainability. And right now I'm chairing our sustainability committee, which hasn't completely taken off the road, but it will be soon. And at our September 13th meeting, I actually brought up and just briefly presented the topic of a sustainable living research initiative. I'm in contact with people in Santa Barbara that are exploring this in the city of Santa Barbara, the county of Santa Barbara, and the city of Goleta presently. I'm basically asking city council their blessing, or, if I could go forward with some more research on that, and if I could bring a presentation back. And basically, just to refresh anyone's memory, what it is it's an opportunity to create a process for something new to happen. So presently, how does something new happen in the building code or in zoning? Unfortunately, people do it illegally. They don't get a permit and they try it and they get busted, and 20 years later, maybe, the planning or the building department says, oh, that's great, now we're going to do straw bale building or composting toilets or gray water or whatever, or some research is done at a university. But there's this very long lag. It's kind of, painstaking lag. What this is an opportunity to do is to allow somebody to come in with a project, align with either like a university or a nonprofit.
Okay, I'm going to have to interrupt you because we're running out of time, and this is sort of a new topic, but I think it's one worth pursuing. So I'll meet with you and we'll figure out how to
I have,
get it.
And I concur, I'd welcome it.
Okay, good. And
I bless it.
I have
Okay.
about 5 other things that I could maybe meet with you on.
Sure,
That I was.
absolutely. Okay, so looking at the hour, we're going to adjourn this meeting, take a couple of minute break in case anybody has anything else they need to do, and then we'll reconvene. Thank you.